Hello, greetings from North Carolina. Me and Mackenzie are up here in Asheville for the week, getting the much needed fresh mountain air and the peace and quiet, trying to get away from some of the pressures and the ongoing changes and observations that are going on. Although, of course, there are some things in which we can't really escape, such as reality, such as the collective consciousness, the collective experience. So this is an astrology report for the final week of November and the first week of December. And we've got a full moon that's going on in Gemini tomorrow. That's Wednesday, the 25th. And although this full moon in Gemini is stereotypically a time where we can be, socializing and interconnecting, and of course we have Thanksgiving in the United States on Thursday or Friday. This full moon in Gemini is a little more serious than usual. As today we have Mercury, the ruling planet of Gemini, is conjunct Saturn and square to Neptune. And this upcoming Friday, the Sun's going to come into this conjunction with Saturn, square to Neptune. So at the time of this full moon tomorrow, which is around 5:45 p.m. Eastern Time, we have this full moon 3 degrees 20 minutes of Gemini. And this is highlighting the Gemini-Sagittarius polarity. And of course we had the Sun just entering Sagittarius on Sunday. So this movement into Sagittarius is this time where we start to explore, where we are broadening our horizon. And it can typically be this magical, more intuitive time, although of course this year we have Saturn transiting Sagittarius, which is making it a little more serious and a little more scrutinizing. As in, this might be a period, particularly with this first Saturn square to Neptune, which is really the underlying theme. And this deepness, this seriousness, this drabness, this feeling of limitation and frustration that we can all be collectively experiencing. We can also be experiencing doubt. We can be experiencing pressure here. As collectively, we are now entering a time where we are going to be very seriously contemplating what is our truth, from who and where do we look towards for sources of inspiration, of knowledge, of wisdom, who are our role models, who can we trust. And we are seriously looking at ourselves right now, and we might feel some of the disconnect from Neptune, which is the magical, dreamy goals, the ideals, these far-sighted fantasies that we all like to look forward to and cherish in our hearts. Well, at this time, it's as though we can be scrutinizing some of these things that are going on. So of course with Mercury conjunct Saturn today, we can all probably hear it in this person's voice with my Sun and Mercury and Gemini in the 12th house. Yeah, this is a period where we can really be feeling limited in terms of what we can see and what we know. And our experiences can be reinforcing our limitations to us, which in certain respects can make us feel like we are losing something, like we're lacking something, like we're disconnected from something. And so we need to talk about how we can appreciate this time, which this time is really collectively a time where we are learning how to be more careful and how to properly discern and how to, this is a time of growing up. And Saturn is this benefactor in the solar system, in our reality, in our makeup, that does lead us into becoming stronger and more capable and more practical and more understanding of the actual reality that we see right in front of us as it is today. And how we can actually see these limitations and these challenges as something that is creating strength and us is truly, I think, the greatest challenge of being a human being. When we have to face limitations, when we get sick and suddenly we have a lack of energy, a lack of connectivity to our intuition, to our typical imagination and spiritual guides and all these sorts of things. This is a time where we are confined, where we are forced to look at things which may not be comfortable to look at. And this is the challenge right now, which is inviting us to transcend these challenges and grow into something that is appreciative of where we actually are and what's going on. And it's very easy to say these words, and I hesitate even as I say them, because it's such an easy thing to say, and then it's such another thing to actually understand and more so feel when we are in these limiting types of experiences. So because we have the full moon tomorrow, of course we are dealing with feelings, as the moon is our emotional, subjective body, really our core source of information that is letting us process everything else is the moon. It brings the solar system to us in a very personal, subjective way. And this full moon being in Gemini is illuminating our own rational processes and functions. How we compare and contrast ourselves to other people, and the concepts, the ideologies, and the perceptions, the way that we look at things, the way we assign language understandings to words, the way we break apart things, is being illuminated. And because this full moon is opposite to Saturn with the sun, we talked about how this is not only illuminating our desire to connect and to share, but it's also challenging our own capability to trust our own faculties to discern and to communicate and to know. This is a period where we might not feel that we know everything, that we have it all together. We are being challenged in our core, and we are processing how our own way of living and interacting, well, maybe we're not totally sure how to do this thing perfectly, as in we might not even know what's best for us sometimes. And this challenges us to look at the extremes that exist in our world, in ourselves, in our reality. And we can see how each of these extremes becomes ungrounded and unrealistic and distorted in each of its own rights. Yeah? It's like we have this capability to rely on false security from culture, from belief systems, from concepts and philosophies. And then we have to see the extremes of where those things lead us if we get too ungrounded and go off in such an unnatural way. And one way that this happens is through traditionalism. Oh, well, this is the accepted belief, and everybody believes it, and everybody in my family believes it. So either we accept that out of a false security, like, well, if I do what everybody else does, then we're all going to be okay. Because, if everybody else knows what they're doing, well, I better just trust everybody. And this is a time where we're realizing, oh, I'm not sure who I can trust. This is a time where being a teacher is tough, and looking to other teachers, it's tough. We don't know who's a teacher right now. We don't know who we can trust right now. And so there's this traditionalism which encourages us to just accept the status quo and what everybody else is doing. And so we're seriously contemplating, well, does everybody know? It's like in this video I talked about last week, how there can be this concept like, oh, this is the one ideology, this is the one book, so only read that book, only look at that ideology. And how limiting that makes us, and how that can generate a bubble of false security, which actually imprisons us from knowing the rest of reality. And then if we stay in that false sense of security and in that bubble, we will actually begin to fear everything that's outside of it, because it's unknown, it's mysterious, it's shady. Let's not go there. And so as each of us is having our bubbles burst, out of the service of having our understanding of nature expanded, so that way we can acquire a true level of inner strength, inner trust, inner responsibility, which is the higher octave of Saturn, which is why when we face limitations, when we face doubt, when we feel like we are rolling the boulder up the mountain and it keeps coming down and up and down and up and down, and we feel like it's just not going anywhere, inevitably this is the hardest part of life. It's not really meant to be fun. And so another way that people like to cop out that's opposite of traditionalism is thinking, you can just do whatever you want. And so you don't have to feel bad. You don't have to feel doubt. You don't have to feel frustration or challenges or feel the experience that can cause us to feel quite bewildered and confused and uncertain and lost. And we can suffer as a result of these experiences. And this should not be belittled, or there should not be some teacher that is saying, yes, but you don't have to deal with the challenges of life if you adopt this teaching, if you do this. Because what those teachings end up doing to us is making us feel like we are a failure when we are experiencing the challenges of life, which just makes everything a double whammy. Like, not only is life drilling us really hard right now, but we messed up for it, and we deserve this punishment. And lo and behold, we start to observe some very interesting phenomenons and patterns in our experience when we start to pay attention to these themes. Because now we're starting to pay attention to masochism. Now we're starting to see the parts of ourselves that convinces ourselves that we deserve to feel lost, to feel disconnected, that we deserve these experiences, and this is punishment, so on and so forth, when in fact these are the challenges which are inviting us to go beyond the bubble of the past and of the limitations of our own perspective. When each of us does have a perspective and a unique truth, but if we only limit ourselves to that one perspective or harbor ourselves around other people that have that one perspective, well, then this can certainly be a time where we start to challenge our own belief, our own ideology, our own bubble, which is not saying that we have to give up on our unique truth. It's inviting us to find it on a deeper level. The only reason we feel like we deserve these things and that life is punishing us and that all is lost is because we don't really understand what our individual truth is yet. Because each of us, honestly, have been bewildered in some way or another by this culture, by this world, by the misled notions that are all pervasive, which is why it's necessary that we have to challenge ourselves at this time, why we do have to feel hopeless and disconnected in these times, and we don't have to feel like this is a bad thing for feeling these things. When we gather around the Thanksgiving table, this is a time where we usually share our perspectives and our stories, and there's this sense of Thanksgiving, and indeed we are still striving for this, yes? Next week we're going to have Venus form a conjunction with asteroid Juno in Libra. There's still, with Black Moon Lilith, there's still this very deep desire to create real harmony here, and yet the challenge is there. The frustration is there. And the diversity of what we see is there, and we can all feel very isolated in our own unique way of seeing things, as we invite and challenge one another to see what is the underlying truth so we can all collectively heal ourselves. Because it's not really us versus them, us versus them. That is the most important underlying lesson that we're getting from all this through the next years. It's not us versus them. It's not my perspective versus your perspective, and mine's wrong or yours is wrong or one of us is right or wrong. It's understanding that all of these different perspectives, in each and every unique way that they have become distorted by the underlying what we need to look at that's messed up. Seeing all these different bits and pieces of us takes us into the understanding of the universal experience of what has limited us in the past. Because we want to move now from this age where we are all fragmented in different philosophies, different truths, different gods, different notions, and unite under the single purpose of this is a world that needs to heal itself. We can all get down with that underlying truth. And so Saturn is this time period, this week, these next several weeks, and then is going to come back around 2 more times to the following year, is forcing us to see what needs to be resolved, which is not necessarily a quick fix. We have to see what really needs to be healed. And we need to therefore have the strength and the courage to see reality as it is and not be afraid. It's not a punishment. It's not because we deserve this. It's because we want to see what is real so we can be here and not live in a delusion until it all blows up in our face. So no, we cannot just elect a new president or a new pope and think that this is going to resolve our situation. No, we can't just adopt a new belief system or open a new book or do a meditation practice one time and this is going to resolve our situation. We have to know what is actually and really going on. And sometimes life puts upon us situations that seem daunting. Life puts upon us situations that does seem too big for us. And that is a humbling experience, is it not? Because that gives us no choice but to surrender to the reality that is. And then there's no possibility to escape into what we wish was. As we grow up and awaken, there does seem to be a bit of this experience of the magic of childhood dissipates. And this can be painful. But at the same time, as the child grows up, there is a naive nature that also dissipates. And so the question is, can we dissolve the naive nature in ourselves without killing our own inner innocence and without killing our own inner child by feeling that we messed up or we don't know or nobody knows and everybody's too messed up and everything's gone to shit, so we think everything sucks and so we kill our own innocence and our own inner child? Is it possible that this is us growing up out of the naive nature of a very bewildered and childish world that is just beginning to come of age with its truest potential, to grow into a planet in which all of us are matured into the proper understanding of what and who we are and what nature actually is? Could it not be possible that we are all collectively so young and just beginning to grow up? And this is why we see all this foolishness, and this is why we see all this devastation. Yes, it is painful. Yes, we do suffer here. But is it possible that this is in fact the rite of passage into growing up into a world that collectively understands and respects what we each are as nature? Which does mean we have to look at where we are, see what got us where we are, and get rid of the bullshit at the core of what is. It's not going to be resolved with a new pope or president. We have to dig deep and look at reality. And reality is going to keep getting meaner and meaner out of service to our souls. So that way we can grow up out of our childish, naive imagination that's just like a 2-year-old child slandering toads and killing animals because it doesn't know any better. And so yes, the mother nature and all these things do come down and let us know, no, you can't treat ourselves, each other, in such a simplistic way that we think that the other serves as something different than what we are. This Neptune square to this full moon in Gemini is bringing up the left brain versus right brain axis. And with Saturn tied in the mix, it's challenging us to learn how to discern what we think we know versus the universe as it actually is, versus nature. And a lot of this does have to do with our left brain cultural programming that does tell us black or white. This is right or wrong. This is pass or fail. This is good guy or bad guy. Do you understand? That's the left brain discerning, labeling, dissecting, rationalizing, overanalyzing, making it all to be a book of good or evil, type of overly simplistic and overly prescribed reality. And we have to know that this has all been programmed in us on some level or another by this culture. And Sagittarius, on the other hand, in its highest octave, is the understanding of natural order, of nature, of law, which speaks for itself. It does not come from culture, it does not come from a book, it does not come from a philosophy or a teacher even. It speaks for itself. And we have had many people who have had various levels of attunement with that nature, who have prescribed various understandings and duties and practices, so on and so forth. And so we are learning to understand in ourselves and out in the world how much of this is actually attuned to nature, and how much of this has actually been simply coming out of a prescription or a miscomprehension that's coming out of a particular limited point of view, a particular point in cultural history that may not actually have to do with nature and has more to do with the man-made constructs that we invented a long time ago and now subconsciously adhere to. Oh, daylight savings time. You go and you work your 9-to-5 job. On the Sabbath, you go to church and you rest. All of these things that we unconsciously do. We are seriously looking at how much is this a prescribed cultural assumption and how much of this reflects actual nature. Because we might be shocked to learn how much of it actually comes from nature, just as much as we might actually be shocked to learn that much of this does come from man-made belief. So as we continue to mature and grow up and see and integrate our own inner strength that comes from itself and from its natural orientation to the world, to other people, to our family members, to each other out of love. As we attune more and more to this, we continue to harbor more power, more transformation. And this is an ongoing process. So again, being kind to our inner child, our inner innocence, is a helpful way for us to create distance from the inner cynic, the inner scientist, the inner hopeless person that tries to lead us away from that aspect of reality. We have to at least care for ourselves enough to know that we are not inherently that lifeless cynic that simply believes that everything in life is a punishment, although we might get tastes and have empathy for that type of feeling. Now is the time for us to ask questions, not to feel bad about asking questions, and not to feel bad about leaving time for these questions to be answered, and allow us to harbor these challenges and experiences to integrate a type of inner fire. It's like we are allowed to experience this life as hard work sometimes because it awakens this inner fire that can be a fury. We can be pissed off at how much this shit sucks. We can be pissed off at how unfair reality can be sometimes because we can be genuine with our feelings, with our experience, enough for us to break down and awaken this inner flame that really does not come about through any way except for to break down, which is why we have to be generous and loving to ourselves and not beat ourselves up that this process does naturally happen and that this inner passion is naturally awakening in each of us. And as we become more matured and awakened into what this inner passion and confidence really is, the confidence comes out of knowing this fury, this energy, this passion is not a problem. It is the source of my inspiration. It is the source for me to do what I know is right, Even when it seems totally unfair, when I have to keep doing the same thing that feels right in the world and everybody else keeps jeering at me, keeps beating me up, keeps making me feel like shit, I know that it's right, and I'm going to harness the difficulty of this experience and use it and throw it into the fire and surrender it and offer it up in such a way that it allows us to keep going forward, even if the rest of the world challenges us, even if it seems totally unfair, even if it does seem like this curse or this punishment. Well, I know in my heart what is still right. I'm not going to give up just like everybody else and say that it's all pointless and sacrifice my inner child and sacrifice my inner innocence and nah, so much for that. We don't have to give up on life. In fact, this inner passion, this inner awakening that is going on through this time, as we purify, as we awaken, this stuff is going to happen. Not this approaching weekend, but the next approaching weekend, we have Mars forming the square to Pluto and opposite to Uranus. There is this tension, there is this energy, but we can learn to harness the frustration and see it as an empowerment to breathe in the revolutionary urges that provoke us to move forward and to continue to mature, growing into this inner power that is united with love, but it doesn't necessarily have to come easily. The high and higher and higher octaves of love are not all fun and games and don't come served to us on a silver platter. And that is to awaken our truest potential, for us to grow up and harbor this inner passion, this inner flame, so we can address and see the issues that need to be seen. Let us not be afraid that the entire universe is not giving us any comfort zone to grow right now. Let's use this to our advantage, to see what is here that needs to be addressed, need to be cleaned up, so that way we can be the heroes of this day and age, and not those that simply try to run away from the issues that we can resolve easily enough when we tap into our truest nature and get rid of all of this subconscious, unconscious programming that is the only stuff that prevents us from being able to heal this world. So there was a rant, there was a bunch of energy. I hope it wasn't coughed up too much. But I think that we can somewhat, empathize with this. Okay. So much love to your beloveds and yourself. Namaste.